I've decided to start with exact sciences like demonology, crystal healing, chakra healing, and fine arts. You know, so these exact sciences that have made the 20th century so efficacious, and that's why we're living so much longer, right? I include fine arts in the group of scams that have been taught throughout the 20th century. Uh, because nowadays when you speak to a so-called expert, they're usually self-styled gurus and self-styled experts. They've read 2 or 3 books. Um, they thought a lot about the arts, and then they wrote theses, PhDs, master theses, and so on, based on their own opinions and ideas instead of based on fact. So the teaching of fine arts I equated with homeotherapy. Now, the thing is that we're going to have a problem because in today's lesson, I want to go back and revert to facts. What you've learned in all fine art degrees, that's what they've taught you at school, at uni. It doesn't matter if you have a PhD in fine arts, you'll be ignorant about what we're going to learn today because they just don't study it. Is that the whole of the academic world, and when I say academic, I mean qualified, trained artists that used to learn in fine art academies. So they were not exactly universities back in the day, but they were the highest form of education that an artist could aspire to in the 19th century. And all of these trained artists, we call them academics or academic artists. Some of them would also lecture, because by the way, one of the traditions in France is that if you were a good artist, you would teach. Unlike England, John Collier, he was a painter. He wrote a magnificent treatise on the art of oil painting. And John Collier said that in France, knowledge is passed on. And that's why they have the most astonishing artistic heritage. I mean, Paris used to be the world capital for the arts in the 19th century. John Collier comments that in England, when artists discover something, they keep it to themselves. And English artists, they have no pupils. They have no students. And if you want to study painting in England, you learn it from a non-artist. Unlike the French, where it was the good painters that would teach painting. Okay, so that's why the best English artists, they went to France to study painting. Now, I've started with a blue image. And you might say, that's a lovely, lovely shade of blue. It's very contemporary. It's definitely from the 20th century, perhaps from the 21st century. Would you agree? Yeah, it's definitely an abstract painting. I mean, there's no question about that. And we've learned at art school, we all did it, that it was after Marcel Duchamp, and there are a few other gods. I mean, you have Marcel Duchamp, you have Picasso, you have people that you cannot question in the pantheon of this great religion that is called fine arts. I've told you, fine arts, this exact science, is nothing more than superstition. Now, this religion has got lots of idols. One of them is Marcel Duchamp. Supposedly, he created conceptual art, and he made classical technique obsolete. That's what we've learned in art school. You've got Picasso, you've got a few, Jackson Pollock, you know, they're all male, they're all white, but it doesn't matter. They're all gods, supposedly. Now, I want to shock you. The painting you are looking at, it's actually from the 19th century, way before abstract art was officially invented by the likes of Kandinsky and so on, another god in the pantheon that cannot be questioned. But I'm here to feed the sheep, not to entertain the goats. So I'm sorry, guys. It's a lie. It's a lie that we've learned in art school. We keep propagating the same genealogy of artists that belong to the same families and that we're all acquainted. It's a big lie. First of all, abstract arts began in prehistory. When you have Neolithic vases decorated with abstract symbols, come on. Ready-mades, they're at least from the Paleolithic. Because Marcel Duchamp said that he discovered the art of ready-mades. You know what's a ready-made? You walk on the streets, you find an object, you exhibit it as an artwork. Ready-made artwork on the streets. Now, the moment prehistoric man, perhaps not even Homo sapiens, perhaps even older than that, Cro-Magnon, even Neanderthal, who knows? The moment you find a shell, you pierce a hole through it, you hang it on a necklace, and you call it an amulet, and you give it magical powers, not only you found a ready-made, but also you've created conceptual art, because you are attributing concepts to an object. What I'm trying to say in this lecture, before we start with real drawings, is that Marcel Duchamp did not invent anything, Kandinsky did not discover anything, none of them did. But the history of art has been extremely Eurocentric and has been extremely naive. It's for the gullible. So if you want to learn history of art, we have to resort back to facts. I don't want... Look, this is idolatry, and I'm here to remove the idols, okay? Let's start with facts. If you do want to worship new gods, because this is the dawn of a new religion, then I believe you should worship the proper people, real people, not fake idols. Let's start with this incredible, incredible artwork. Now, in the 1880s, there used to be a group of artists called Les Arts Incohérents, so the incoherent artists. They were already conceptual. They did everything that the Dadas and Marcel Duchamp and so on did 40 years later. So, this is a painting. And I've got the title written somewhere on my phone, so if you give me just a second, this should have been opened. The title of this painting is called, this painting is from 1884. Okay, 30 years before any abstract art was officially invented in the West, and 40 years before Marcel Duchamp created the so-called conceptual art. This painting is called, it was painted by Alphonse Allais. I will put all the names in the video description below, so you can have access to all these true geniuses. And this is called The Awe of the Navy Recruits Seeing for the First Time Your Blue, O Mediterranean Sea. So these are Navy recruits, wearing blue, of course, looking at the blue sea. Do you want more conceptual than that? Sorry, Marcel Duchamp. Alphonse Allais was 30 years ahead of you. Next painting, also by Alphonse Allais. This one is a little bit later. It's still from the 19th century, of course, because the contemporary arts are old. They're not contemporary. Like I've told you, they're at least from prehistory. So I consider the whole of the contemporary arts as a proto-Egyptian style, including all the art fairs like Frieze and the Venice Biennale. It's all proto-Egyptian, you know, because we've done it all during Paleolithic times. The difference is that the contemporary arts, they became decorative, which is another insult to use in fine art colleges. And now I'm using it against the people that use that trick, that cheap trick. They're very decorative. Now, Alphonse Allais made this red painting in 1887, and it's called Apoplectic Cardinals Harvesting Tomatoes on the Shore of the Red Sea. And this is a study of the Aurora Borealis. So I'll repeat. Apoplectic cardinals harvesting tomatoes on the shore of the Red Sea, a painting from 1887. But you might say, oh, but Nelson, these are not artworks, these are critiques on art. They're done by humorists or by caricaturists or... I'm sorry, don't be a sophist. Marcel Duchamp did not intend to create art. When Marcel Duchamp came up, he actually created an anti-art movement. He didn't create it, but he joined an anti-art movement called the Dada. You cannot use the same argument to say that these abstracts are not art, and then attribute the very same argument and say that Marcel Duchamp is very artistic because he was corrosive of the art world. Sorry, guys, don't be a sophist. Now, do you want ready-mades? Here they are. And this ready-made is anonymous. We don't know who the artist was. It's even older. It's from 1882. Sorry, Sarah Lucas. There have been people working with stockings 100 years before you. So all these so-called revolutions of the contemporary arts, I want you, once for all, and I need you to propagate the gospel of this new religion, which is historical fact. Okay? I'm trying to cast some light into the evil idolatry of the contemporary art teaching and training. Les arts incohérents should be just as famous as the Dada movement and the Surrealists and the Abstractionists and all those people, and perhaps even more. So you didn't know this for sure, because nobody knows Les Arts Incohérents. Jules Lévy was the great genius behind this group, Les Arts Incohérents, and I'm going to read you what they have exhibited. They exhibited a cow painted in the colors of the French flag, a sculpture made of Swiss cheese, a painting of a man. You have to visualize this, okay? Use your imagination. A painting of a man whose mouth is penetrated by a collar that is tied around the neck of a rabbit in a cage in front of it. I cannot visualize it, but use your imagination. In other words, they were doing happenings, installation art, conceptual art, institutional critique in the 1880s. Okay? So, I present to you, please meet the lovely Baroness Elsa von Freytag-Loringhoven. I think German always sounds like you're torturing somebody. No. She was the creator of the urinal. The urinal that was claimed to be done by Marcel Duchamp. The urinal that supposedly is the first great art of conceptual, great artwork of conceptual art, was actually created by a woman. It was a feminist statement, and unsurprisingly, it was taken over by a man. Now, the urinal from 1917, you should read the convoluted explanation that Tate Modern is trying to give to attribute it to Marcel Duchamp. Because there's a lot of money invested in Marcel Duchamp. We're talking hundreds of millions. You should read the convoluted explanation they give. They even say that perhaps she submitted the urinal so that Marcel Duchamp would not be associated with such an art piece. Really? Come on, Tate Modern, you can do better. Really? Now, the problem is that there is a letter that Marcel Duchamp wrote to his sister, and I'm going to quote. I'm going to read it. I'm not paraphrasing, I am reading it. Marcel Duchamp wrote 2 days after the urinal got rejected for this art exhibition. He wrote to his sister, one of my female friends, under a masculine pseudonym, Richard Mott, sent in a porcelain urinal as a sculpture. Now, the problem is that this explosive letter did not become public domain until 1983. But I've studied in the late 90s, and I'm telling you, even nowadays, all the Faculty of Fine Arts, pretty much, with very few exceptions, they're still pretending that the urinal is a Marcel Duchamp creation. We know since 1983 as a fact that it's not. But we also know that it's impossible to have been because Marcel Duchamp also lied. The urinal that he pretended he bought from a certain merchant, that merchant never commercialized this model of urinal. So there's a lot of lies and deception and so on. Now, I want to show you one last piece, also by, sorry, allow me the pleasure of reading German, also by Baroness Elsa von Freytag-Loringhoven. This is another sculpture of hers, but also from 1917, and it's called God. I think that even conceptually, this is more similar to the urinal than anything Marcel Duchamp did. So even stylistically, her work is very much in place with the urinal. Now, why am I starting with this horrible religion called contemporary fine arts training? It's to demystify quite a few dogmas that we've learned in art school. Remember, the religion of Dada, Marcel Duchamp, they tell us that technique is irrelevant, that we have greater geniuses, much greater geniuses than anything ever done in the past, like Marcel Duchamp. What I'm trying to tell you is that these idols, their feet are clay. Don't trust what you've learned in art school, because actually, you cannot trust anything you've learned in art school. This belongs, not this. I really love Les Arts Incohérents. I love all of these people that I've just shown you. But the likes of the Dada and what came after, abstract expressionism, whatever, belong to a time where the knowledge on how to draw died. And everything that dies stinks. And because we're not here to do a course on necrophilia, let's move very quickly into periods where drawing used to be taught. Now we are going to start with the Beaux-Arts, the Faculty of Fine Arts in Paris. Mind you, you only see lads. Women were barred from studying fine arts in France. Actually, I've got a list here. In Portugal, where I come from, women were allowed to study fine arts in 1881. And you might say that's quite late, but now get ready for the shock. Are you ready? Are you sitting down? Are you in your chairs? So in Portugal, it was in 1881. In France, it was only in 1897. That's 16 years later that women were allowed to study fine arts. And in Germany, lo and behold, 1918, with the end of the war, only then women were allowed to study fine arts. So that's 37 years after Portugal. I had no idea. Until because we always think, oh, northern countries are so evolved. Sorry, not always. Now, the fine art courses during this period, they were just for women. I'm going to show you one little exception later on. And if you think that artists used to be very well behaved and very, well, you'll have to revise your opinion. Do you think that lad over there looks well behaved? I don't think so. No, and also they chose to take the picture. They chose to take the class picture with a nude model. Of course, this was a provocation. Let's not forget that nudity was accepted in painting and in sculpture, but not in photography. You know, those like the 19th century ideals of morals and ethics, they're quite contradictory. So you definitely have the lads, all sorts of personalities. You've got the geek. He keeps on studying even during the photo. You've got the poser. You've got those that pretend they're not really looking, but their bodies are turned towards the camera. You know, they're all wearing fine suits, which means that they've dressed up for the event. It's fascinating how you have these faces. I mean, everyone is pretty much, all of these faces have pretty much died over a century ago. It's wonderful, wonderful to see again how people looked like. So this was the classroom of a certain year at the École des Beaux-Arts in Paris. But you had competition. You had another tool. Again, it's a provocation. They chose to be photographed with the nude model. This was Académie Julian. And the Julian Academy was the finest private art school in the world, probably. I particularly love that student over there behind the sheet of paper with a drawing. And you've got the model, of course. Sorry, I shouldn't say the model. The nymph, the muse of the arts. It's again fascinating to see who these lads were. Some of them became quite famous. So these are historical portraits of important people. And finally, this academy, Académie Colarossi, had courses for women. So I repeat that in 1897, women were finally accepted at the Beaux-Arts in Paris, the official art schools of France. But you had private art schools that started teaching women just a little bit before that. So this is a class, I don't know if I wrote the year. Yes, this class is from 1892. So that's 5 years before they were officially accepted in state schools. In this private school, I believe this was one of the first women's class in France. So that's 1892. They are drawing the poor, poor, poor child. I mean, the child looks bored to death and has to pose for like 20 hours and pretend that it's a little angel or something, you know. That's what they liked back then. Another very cute portrait from the period. Who were the teachers? The 19th century training was so exquisitely good that, in my opinion, it represents the peak, the absolute peak of the realistic tradition in the West, as you are going to see very soon with artworks. Now, you have a few artists that are way, way, way too important. So you've got from 1870, you've got this self-portrait by Alexandre Cabanel. Alexandre Cabanel. And Alexandre Cabanel was one of the tutors that revolutionized the way drawing used to be taught. You know, because drawings were quite kitsch, quite bad up to a certain period. And then you have this immense revolution in fine arts training. Let's start with the real geniuses. Alexandre Cabanel, the first one. This is a painting that he did. I wrote some notes in here. He painted the Fallen Angel in 1847. He was only 24 years old. Look at the exquisite quality of this painting. Remember, they didn't cheat. It's not like self-styled gurus nowadays that they say they're painters, they say they have PhDs in fine arts, but when it's time to draw and paint, they have to project the image onto the canvas and trace it, because they can't actually draw. And if you're very, very, very bad at drawing, you might even become a professor of drawing in one of the world's leading institutions. So this is the current state of fine art teaching. Back in the day, they only worked from life. So this 24-year-old kid painted this type of images. Not only he painted from the life model, but he also conceived a whole universe and a whole vision, like every example of classical art. Classical art was always conceptual. Always. You do not have classical art without a concept. Always. The conceptualists didn't invent anything. The conceptualists, they just said that the bar can be lower and the aesthetic and technical quality can be nil as long as there is a concept. But art was always conceptual from prehistory, I repeat. You know, we were still living up the trees and we were already conceptualists, okay? Now, Alexandre Cabanel, tutor number 1 that I would like you to remember. Tutor number 2, Isidore Pil, or Pils, I don't know how to say that in French. Isidore, I can say that. This is a photograph by Nadar. Nadar was one of the first photographers in history. Yes, you got this painting of a Mexican empress, so Empress Charlotte. This painting is from 1859. And have a close look, please. How impressionist this already is. Okay. By the way, it's not even the best example of impressionism in classical painting. Again, the Impressionists didn't create anything new. The only thing they got access to were 2 smaller tubes of paint, so yeah, good deal. They could go and paint outdoors. And because the French weather is just as bad as in the UK, they have to speed up because it's going to rain in the next 10 minutes. So you've got like 10 minutes to do a landscape. But classical artists have always been painting with loose brush strokes and fresh colors and so on and so forth. So this mythology needs to be dispersed, okay? Classical artists. This is any. It's not even liberal classical. We're talking the most conservative classical teaching of the period. And look how loose and fresh and full of joy those fabrics are, okay? It was very easy for any classical painter to paint like an impressionist. Of course, the impressionists could not paint like the classicals, but that's a different story. Next artist, Adolphe Yvon is not really my favorite, I must confess. He has some terrible drawings made in Russia, which the French loved. But that's a different story. Adolphe Yvon, this is actually a very good painting by him. It's the best one I found, because everything else that he did, I don't think it's up to this standard. This is a portrait of Ferdinand Barrotta, painted in 1867. And again, you see loose, lush brush strokes, flowing. It's very alla prima. It's very done in one go. It's very done in one session, you know. Again, painted from life, of course. There is no cheating in this period. You know, you can't get away with it. You have to learn how to draw. Again, very modern background and the lower part of the painting. So Impressionism is nothing more than just an unfinished classical painting, a, a classical sketch, let's say. Back to back to um, reality. Now, another artist. This is still not students' work, okay? I'm just showing you the painters that were influential in 19th century artistic training in France at the Beaux-Arts. This lecture will be mostly about the Beaux-Arts school, the Faculty of Fine Arts. It wasn't a faculty, but it's the equivalent. So Paul Delaroche painted this portrait in 1829. Now listen to this. It's the Marquis de Pastoret, 1829. Observe, observe. The brush marks on that hand. I mean, it's way before Impressionists, of course. But it's already Impressionist in aesthetics in certain parts of the painting. Listen, I wasn't even hunting for examples. They just naturally come across. Because if you want to hunt for examples, Turner was way more Impressionist than most French Impressionists 50 years before and more, 70 years before. Rembrandt was incredibly loose in the brush marks 300 years before. El Greco, come on. El Greco in the 1500s was already expressionist with the brush marks. I keep telling you, the contemporary artists have not invented anything. They just catered to modern tastes. So they're decorative paintings, essentially. You know, they cater to our modern tastes. They appeal to us. But technically, aesthetically, and conceptually, there's nothing new in there. Okay, so the tutors. The most important one, Jean-Léon Gérôme. This is the portrait of Gérôme. He was a very, very serious, harsh teacher, an excellent teacher. You would really learn how to draw and paint under Gérôme, but he was very direct. That's an example of a Gérôme painting. Look at the wonderful rendition of, I mean, it's just all absolutely spectacular. Look at the way the silk is painted. It's just a marvelous, marvelous, marvelous painting. Let's not forget that in this period, Orientalism was the big fashion. So they were obsessed with Oriental cultures. You couldn't travel, pretty much. I mean, the rich could, and the rich went to the Middle East, and the rich went to Egypt, and they went to the Holy Land, and they went to Turkey, and they went here and there. And then they painted images, and they brought them back to Europe. So Europeans were mesmerized with the different types of clothes, traditions, and so on. So Orientalism is the big fashion at this period. Now, thanks to my friend Ramon Hurtado, and Ramon Hurtado is a teacher at the Grand Central Atelier in New York, one of the finest art schools in the world, a proper art school. They really teach you how to draw. He's got this wonderful YouTube channel that he also talks about 19th century art history. Jérôme also painted portraits of silly dogs, which I had no idea. So here you've got Marengo, and now get ready for the cutest thing you'll ever see in your life. This one is called Boy. So again, these are commission works, commercial works also by Jérôme. Now, the last person that is influential to the course I'm just about to show you is Charles Bargue. Charles Bargue was a student of Jérôme, and he created the drawing course that was crucial for the development of students in the 19th century. 13-year-old students would start by drawing like this. I repeat, 13-year-old students. So this was the minimum requirement to enter the Beaux-Arts. Did you hear that? The minimum requirement. Another example of a drawing. These are all drawings by Charles Bargue. So you've got the torso. Again, for 13-year-olds, these are exams, by the way. Some are even scribbled with grades, and the teachers, some are stamped as well with the Beaux-Arts stamp. And if they were approved, they could enter the Beaux-Arts. This is the hand of Voltaire. It's quite freaky. It's a very 19th century tradition in France, in Britain. When somebody died, you would take plaster casts of their faces, you know, the death masks, or the hands, or so on. So this is the hand of Voltaire, submitted as an admission exam for the fine arts in Paris. And this is what I am talking about. This is the training that you would get at the Beaux-Arts. So, the whole point of going to the Beaux-Arts is to attend the life drawing classes, mostly in the evening. And you would end up with these spectacular results. So, none of these artists is famous. The ones I'm going to show you from now onwards, they've been conveniently removed from the Bible of the contemporary art world, because maybe if you start comparing students' work like this with the so-called contemporary masterpieces, maybe you would quickly conclude that any of these students is way superior to any of our so-called masters. So it's time to give credit to the unknown. André Jean-Édouard Monchablon. He was a student of Lefebvre, he was another teacher, and Robert Fleury. Look at the incredible drawing. In this period, this drawing is already in charcoal. Why am I saying that? We assume they're all in charcoal, right? Wrong, wrong, wrong. Charcoal only started being used, this is actually quite fascinating. Charcoal could only be used after they invented fixative. There were no fixatives before, get ready, 1841. So no drawing made before the mid-19th century was ever made in charcoal because there was no way you could fix it. We think it's charcoal because we are ignorant, but it's not charcoal. I'll tell you what it is. Now, if you want to find out what is ampulitis, you have to attend until the end of this lecture. Some drawings are not charcoal, okay? Another exquisite drawing in charcoal again. So remember, all of these drawings were made from life. This one is by Charles-Marie Adeline Pardriel. Another beautiful, beautiful exam drawing. Then you would have spectacular drawings. This one is from 1868. He was a student of Isidore Pil. Isidore Pil painted that portrait and the very kitsch charcoal drawings that I've told you about, but the French loved it. Edouard Joseph Danton, another incredible study of the human figure made from life. Whoever is listening to this live stream, I challenge you, professors of fine arts, to come and draw like these students. Let's not forget, these were 20-year-old kids, and they were already drawing like this, okay? Now, this one is actually by because Portugal had a lot of exchange programs with the French fine art schools. This one is by Ernesto Ferreira Condeixa. It's from 1881. He was a student of Cabanel and Adolphe Yvon. So Cabanel, you've seen before, the tutor, and Yvon as well. So another great drawing. Now, as you can see, the drawings are realistic enough to look real, but they're idealistic enough to look grand. The École of Beaux-Arts in this period was not interested in absolute realism. Absolute realism was for non-artists. Real artists, they have to create visual poetry. And poems are usually not realistic. Poems are usually allegorical or metaphorical, or, like I say, I've read this somewhere. There's nothing more realistic than a police report. But the police report is never literature. So never confuse art with reality. Reality is usually not artistic enough to create a good work of art, like police reports. Very realistic, but they're not literature. Would you agree? I agree. Now, back to some of the drawings. What you have in most of these drawings, this one is a great example, is hyper-simplification of the shadow shapes. Typical of the École in the 19th century was that they would try to render the shadow shapes very vague and mysterious without too much detail, and then create crisper, more detailed differences in tones, somewhere along the mid-tones, somewhere along the place where the shadows meet the lights. So it's on that border that you have complexity. Does that make sense to you? You gain several things when you follow this method. First of all, your painting will automatically look effortlessly like a grand work of art because it feels like it was an aesthetic choice. And when you have choices, you make your artworks more deliberate. You create a statement. So the students would learn to make effective choices that would also save time. Because the truth is that if you highly render your shadows, not only you're going to waste another 10 or 20 hours in your drawing, like photorealist painters do, but you'll also end up with a drawing that is surprisingly less strong. It looks weaker to the human eye. It looks over-labored. It looks over-rendered. It looks like a photocopy of reality, like a Xerox copy. And that's not something very interesting to look at. So I repeat, what students would learn at the École would be to simplify reality, but still create a convincingly realistic drawing. You simplify, but at the same time, it's complex. Do you understand? It's a paradox. Now, let me show you more drawings. Some museums, again, all these drawings were made, this one was made by a 19-year-old, Gabriel Ferrier. And some of the drawings are now finally, they're being digitized in very high resolution because museums and fine art schools are starting to release some interesting content. I'd like to show I'd like to show you that. Look at the level of detail that you can see nowadays, thanks to the efforts that museums are releasing. Now, as you can see, when you zoom in, academic training was incredibly loose. It's not a tight drawing at all. You have the smudging done with a stump. The smudging creates the base. The stump is that rolled piece of paper. It's also called tortillon in French. Tortillons are different from stumps, but they're about the same thing. It's like if you smudge with your own finger. Do you remember back in school when you wanted to erase and you didn't have an eraser? You would use your thumb to try to rub out the pencil. You recall that, don't you? We all did it in arts class when we would forget the materials. So it's like smudging with your finger, but the advantage is you don't leave greasy marks on the paper and sweat marks, you know. So essentially, it's a heavily stamped structure, and then you go over it. You go over it with sharp pencil, and you allow the lines to stay. You don't smudge those lines. And those sharp lines create a sense of structure that reads very well from a distance. So once you zoom out, see, the drawing does not look smudged, does not look too cloudy, thanks to those black lines. What I'm trying to tell you is that this used to be a super fast method. Super quickly. A bit of a smear to create an idea of shadow. Make all the shadows roughly the same tone, you know, keep them simple, because shadows can be simple. And then create the illusion of detail with a sharp black pencil. And don't smudge that. It's a quick sketch that looks like a highly rendered drawing. Do you understand? They were very good in the 19th century. They knew how to avoid too much work. And this is the definition of effectiveness. You work little and you produce a lot. Now, another example. This is by a Turkish student. So, Halil Pasha. He was a student of Jérôme. And you have, again, really beautiful textures of the paper. By the way, they used to work a lot on laid papers. Laid papers have that texture with lines. It's similar to the contemporary paper we call ingres. In Britain, I believe you say ingres or something of that, or ingres or something. But the French say ingres. It's a paper that has lines. And those papers used to be very popular in the 19th century, also because technology to make a smooth paper was not really quite there back then. And charcoal loves a texture to hold on to. So laid papers are good. You can really see the vertical texture of the paper. Can you see those lines? The vertical ones? Listen, you see that on the shadow shape? So that's the texture of the paper. Now, I just want to quickly show you another drawing made by a Portuguese too. This was drawn from casts. Before you were allowed to draw from life, you had to draw from sculptures. You couldn't draw a life model if you can't draw a sculpture. Simple, easy. It's logical. I mean, how are you going to draw something that moves if you cannot even draw something that stands still? So this is a spectacular exam drawing by Henrique Poussin. He was also Portuguese. This was made in 1881. Poussin was 21 years old. And again, it's not made with charcoal. This is actually made, are you ready? With a type of shale. Now, shale is a stone. You know shale? Shale is similar to the black, you know the blackboards that used to be used in the past to write things on. How do you call that stone? The black stone. Oh God, yeah. Anyway, shale is a type of stone. Did you know that you could draw with shale? Incredible. So before charcoal became very popular, shale was like the big thing. And I just would like to show you something else, which is the fact that all of these drawings were done in expedient amounts of time. I mean, nowadays, if you go to a classical atelier and you want to learn like this, you're going to spend on average about 2 months to produce such a drawing. I'm serious. And you are paying monthly. So a lot of these classical ateliers, and I know because I've studied in some of them to learn more technique, you are paying monthly and you learn methods that they take you roughly about 2 months to produce such a drawing. Now, let's compare to the 19th century efficacious way of drawing, proper classical technique. These were exam drawings made by students, not even consummate masters. Okay, I repeat, these are students' work. He was 20 years old, 21. Not even consummate masters. And there was a deadline. The deadline was maximum of 12 hours, including breaks. So that means less, maybe about 10, 11 working hours. There were big drawings as well. They're about A2 or larger than A2. And you have to get rid of the texture of the paper. And you know that if you draw with charcoal, or shale in this case, onto rough paper, you get a really ugly texture, like really, really ugly. And as you can see, this is absent from these drawings. So half of the work was actually to go with a very, very sharp fine point and do lots of dot picking and filling in the grain of the paper. Okay? The drawing itself was probably done in 2 or 3 hours. That's what I'm trying to say. And then another 6 hours of dot picking. But that's just the way it was back then. More marvelous drawings. This one by Jean-Eugène Bulon, 1873. He was a student of Cabanel and Yvon. So most of these drawings can be, oh, a famous one, John Singer Sargent. This was his exam drawing for the Beaux-Arts. And yes, he was 21 years old. So this is drawn from a cast, from a sculpture. Beautiful, isn't it? Like, I mean, it's truly, truly beautiful. And again, a maximum of 12 hours, where half of the time or more was dot picking to get this smooth quality to the gradients. An unfinished drawing, but also quite beautiful. This one is by Joseph Louis Ferdinand Blanchecotte, 1886. Now, if you zoom in ever so slightly, you see what I mean. They would start by blocking all of the shadow with a flattish color. You don't even really see. For example, it's hard to know if this back line, if it's the back, and then the outline of the arm is somewhere there in the middle, which would be the anatomically correct thing to do. But the artists deliberately would remove all of those details, including the shape of the outline. They would have been removed because they were unnecessary for this stage of the drawing. They worked very, very, very efficaciously, I repeat. Beautiful way to draw and very effective. We are practically ending the lecture. Joseph Prosper Florence, a student of Cabanel, 1874. So another drawing. This one is more highly rendered. I repeat, they're all drawn from life. There is no way you could have projected images or cheat or take photographs or whatever. This is the art of drawing. The anatomy must be correct. Another one. We are mostly looking at male nudes because drawing the female was frowned upon in a lot of art schools. And also, some of the examples I'm showing you, they're, um, they're from students of some countries where drawing the female was taboo, like in Portugal, for example. So all of these Portuguese artists I've shown you, when they went back to Lisbon, they would hide the female drawings very well and just show the male nudes, okay? So you've got more examples. You have notes written by the academy, the stamp of the school, tutors' observations on the drawing, grades, and so on and so forth. Look at this amazing one. It's again drawn from a sculpture. It's absolutely spectacular by Marie-Henri Raoul Louis Prat. Long name, 1898. He was a student. He had lots of teachers. He was a student of Gustave Moreau, Jean-Jacques René, Charles Thirion, Aimé Moreau, and François Flamand. Oh dear, 5 teachers. But he was exquisite, as you can see. Can you notice the hypersimplification of the shadow shapes? I hope you do. Okay, this should be something that you should start recognizing. Another great drawing, full of life and movement. Same student. So let's compare the two. This one is drawn from the cast, and this one is drawn from life. Now, as you can know, models, you probably know this, models cannot hold this kind of poses for extended periods of time with open arms and so on. A lot of the drawing had to be done from memory. In order for you to draw very well from memory or from imagination, you need to know anatomy. Because if you know anatomy, you can draw all of those structures without having to see them in front of you. Because you know by heart where to put each muscle and which is the shape of the muscle, roughly speaking, I mean, as an average. Incredible drawing. And I just would like to conclude with the Bargue. The Bargue method of drawing. Here we are, because on Monday starts a Charles Bargue course, and you're more than welcome to join if you guys want to learn how to draw properly. So this is going to be the very same training that was taught in the 19th century France. The one for 13-year-olds, you know, the Charles Bargue methods. It's going to be done with charcoal on paper, no cheating. All has to be done exclusively by eye. And the purpose of the Bargue course is that when you finish the course, your margin of error drops to roughly 1 millimeter maximum. Yes, I'm serious. So when you learn how to draw by using proper classical methods, I mean, my margin of error nowadays is about 1/3 of a millimeter. I am serious too. When I started drawing before the Bargue course, my margin of error was huge, sometimes even centimeters, inches, you know. When I did the Bargue course, my first Bargue, the margin of error was 2 millimeters, exclusively by sight, I repeat. The second Bargue drawing I did was 1 millimeter, and now it's easier for me now to measure by eye than to use the ruler. The ruler sometimes upsets me, you know. So, and this is it for today's lecture. Do you have any questions by any? No?